So a phrase that we use very often um, as negotiators is a phrase that goes something on the lines of "I get the impression that." It's a really nice turn of phrase. It's non-judgmental, and I'm a firm believer you can stick anything on the end of that. It's really difficult to take offence. So next time your wife is climbing the walls and shouting at you, then you turn around and say, I get the impression this has made you really angry. And she will either tell you that you're right, and it's now her turn in the conversation. So she's telling you stuff, or she'll correct you. So she might turn around and go, no, I'm not angry. I'm just really frustrated about this. They'll either correct you or tell you that what you're saying is correct. So it's a really nice turn phrase to use. If you've got a difficult conversation to have with somebody, and we very often have in business, very often it's starting that conversation, which is the hard thing. You've actually, once you've started, you're away. So it's like, how do I deal with the elephant in the room? How, so when somebody comes in and says, you need to speak to Steve, nobody wants to work with him because he smells. It's like, oh, grief, where on earth do I go with this? You know, you can bring Steve in and you can throw the team under the bus by saying, yeah, the team have been in, nobody wants to work with you because you smell. Or you could turn around and using this set of skills and say, do you know what, Steve, we've worked together for a long time. And I get the impression that you're struggling with your personal hygiene. Steve, I get the impression that you're drinking more than you used to. Steve, I get the impression you've been spending money on prostitutes. You can stick anything on the end of it. It's very difficult to take offense. And they will either say, yeah, that's right, or they will correct you. They will not bite your head off. So if you've got one of those conversations to have, if you've got to approach that elephant in the room, very often using that phrase, I get the impression that is a really nice, non judgmental way of doing it. It's a really good way. If you're a business leader, or a line manager in a leadership role within an organization, and you've got to have one-to-ones with members of your team, it's a really nice way of dealing with some of those thorny issues with a one-to-one. I get the impression that it's a really nice non-judgmental way of approaching it, but direct.
Nigel, you have a very interesting background. You've worked in the past as a hostage negotiator for several years, and I was just wondering before we got started, there must be a story or an example or a situation that happened to you years ago that is still with you years later that you still remember. And I'm talking about a situation where you were negotiating with a hostage. And if I ask you, like, is there one occasion in particular that you still remember that something happened there where we also have some lessons or things that business professionals, business leaders could consider that can be useful, that could be useful for them in their negotiations, in their day-to-day communication as well? Anything in particular that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I deployed to 130 incidents over a 10-year period as a negotiator. Um, And and probably the one that sticks in my mind the most is actually the first one I ever went to. So I suppose the first one you go to is always going to be pretty special. But this was an armed siege inside an address. There was a guy in there. He'd poured petrol all over the house. He'd got a gun. He said there was a baby in the address. So I was sat in the office. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I get this phone call saying, Nigel, can you deploy to this job? And they give me these circumstances. And I said, yeah, sure, I'm on my way. So I went down and got in the car. And as I was driving to this incident, the other negotiator rang me. So we always work in twos, we're never on our own. And the other negotiator rang me, and he was a really experienced negotiator. He was a senior officer. He'd been doing this a long time. And I remember the first words out of his mouth when I picked the phone up were, are you going to take the lead on this? And I think everything within me just wanted to say, no, I'll tell you what, you take the lead on this one. I'll just watch you and I'll do it next time. And I just had this out of body experience where I just heard myself go, yeah, yeah, sure, I'll take the lead on this. And I immediately thought, what have I done? You know, I've got no experience whatsoever. This guy's been doing it for the best part of 10 years. Um, And we got there. I got out of the car. I deployed, and I'm stood in the front of this address, and I'm just about to deliver my opening line. And you start to get those little voices in your head at that point, saying, are you really cut out for this? You've never done anything like this in your life. This is the moment. If you're going to get somebody killed, this is when it's going to happen. It was such a high pressure situation. And it's really weird because, in those circumstances, that voice inside my head has got to be telling me good things. That little voice in my head has got to be saying to me in that moment, I'm not a hostage negotiator. I'm the hostage negotiator. And no matter how many of these situations you go to, how many times you're put in this situation, you're never going to be comfortable. But you've got the skills. Now shut up and crack on. And I got on with it, and within 30 seconds, those feelings are gone. You're in your groove and you're away. The anticipation is always worse than the actual event itself. And sometimes we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to other people. You'd never turn around to somebody else and say, do you know what? I don't think you're up for this. Or do you not think you're overstretching yourself? But we're happy to say those things to ourselves. So negotiation for me is a confidence game. Having difficult conversations, having meaningful conversations, it's just a confidence game, and you need that voice in your head. I still speak at conferences now. I spoke at one a couple of months ago. It was a room full of medical consultants, professors, and I was sat there just before I stood up, and I thought, I am the most stupid person in this room. The voice can be telling me that. It can be saying, legitimately, you are the most stupid person in this room. It can also be saying, you're the only hostage negotiator in this room, and none of these people in this room can do what you have done. So, yeah, be kind to yourself. That voice, no matter what walk of life you're in, what sort of business you're in, be kind to yourself. That voice should be telling you good things.
Be kind to yourself. And this is so relevant, Nigel, not just when we are negotiating with a hostage, but like, for example, for me as a presentation coach, you said that situation, that was the first time for you. You've done many other of those of similar situations after that, but still, it doesn't matter. You can do 1,000 deployments,
Yeah.
or I don't know how you call them in your world,
Yeah.
but still it will feel uncomfortable. And the same is true when speaking in public. You are a public speaker now.
Yeah.
We know that presenting, communication, speaking in public is not a comfortable thing to do, but of course
No.
there are things that can be done to
Yeah.
deal with the discomfort in a more positive way, to embrace discomfort. and
Absolutely.
and also, is there one thing? I say one thing, it doesn't have to be one. It can, feel free to share
Mhm.
whatever comes to mind. Then something that business leaders think they understand about negotiation, but often, now with your experience, you know that they get it wrong. They think that they understand it,
Yeah.
but in reality they don't.
Yeah. So very often we tie ourselves in knots when we're going into a negotiation. We use that sort of language with ourselves. I'm going into a negotiation today. I'm negotiating with somebody from the union today. Um, the one thing I learned from being a hostage negotiator is that, I mean, we rarely negotiate. As hostage negotiators, we rarely negotiate. It's a complete misnomer. If you think about it, there's an armed robbery down the road in a bank. There's 40 hostages in there. There's four guys with sawn off shotguns and stockings over their heads. What's the negotiation? I'm not going to say to them, I'll tell you what, you have 10 and I'll have 10. I've got to win. It's not a negotiation. All a negotiation is a conversation with a purpose. A negotiation is a meaningful conversation. And it doesn't matter whether you're negotiating commercially with somebody, whether you're negotiating with a member of your team, you're looking about how sort of new ways of working, or whether you're negotiating with your kids. If you want to become a better negotiator, don't negotiate. Have a conversation with a purpose. Just have a meaningful conversation. If I can ignore the fact that somebody I'm talking to is waving a gun around, it's just a conversation between two guys. So why make it more complicated than it actually needs to be? People will say to me on a regular occasion, well, the thing is, Nigel, you don't understand. We're negotiating with Tesco. And I'm going, you're not negotiating with Tesco. You're having a conversation with Jenny and Steve. Jenny and Steve just happen to work for Tesco. So just have a conversation. Have a conversation with a purpose.
Let's go there into in a little bit more detail. So you say, okay, we as negotiators, we don't really negotiate, and you say, okay, this applies also in business contexts. You don't have to negotiate. You need to have a conversation with a purpose. What does that mean in practice? So if we don't negotiate in the way we normally intended to, which means, okay, I need to try and win this particular
Hmm.
side of the, I don't want to call it argument, but this
Yeah.
side of the conversation. You maybe I'm prepared to give you this particular aspect.
Yeah.
So we don't have to negotiate. We need to have that conversation. In practice, what do we need to do then?
So I need to do two things, two very, very simple things. The first one is get you talking and keep you talking. The second one is listen like a life depends on it. It's as simple as that. If I can get you talking and keep you talking, you will tell me things that you never intended. And all the time as a negotiator, I'm thinking, what did he say? What did he mean? How can I use it? Because very often when we go into a negotiation, it's two sides coming together with completely different ideas. Um, and you're trying to potentially get one over on the other. You're trying to get away with the best deal that you possibly can. Where actually, if we go in there, we get the other person, the other side, get them talking, keep them talking. They will tell us things that are never intended. They will give things away. Because if you give somebody enough room in the conversation, if you manage a conversation so that they're the one that's doing all the talking, they will tell you things. Because irrespective of what anybody might tell you, um, you can't control what comes out your mouth. It's like this conversation now. If you give me enough room in the conversation, I will fill it, and that's the skill of a good interviewer. You keep the focus on me, you keep me talking, and all the things that I was thinking about before I came into this session, thinking I'm going to talk about that. I'm definitely not going to talk about that. I'm going nowhere near that. You give me enough room in the conversation, and they will all come out. So a good negotiation is one where actually you're talking very little. If I'm talking more than 20% of the time in a negotiation, I'm talking too much. Because if I'm talking, I'm learning nothing. If you're talking, I'm learning things and I'm going to use them.
Would
So
that
I'm going to
be
go. Sorry.
Oh, so sorry, Nigel. Would that be a ratio, a useful ratio for people to consider, like 20, 80%?
Yeah,
20 listening, well, 20% maximum you talking, 80% the other person talking.
yeah. I mean that comes with skill. That
Mm.
comes with skill and it comes with practice. So if we start off with just make sure they're talking more than you, and the more talking they do, the more room that you give them, then that percentage will automatically start to decrease. Because the thing is, when they get talking, if you're doing the right things and they think that you're listening, you're invested in what they're saying, if you're talking to somebody, you know that they're listening, you'll say more. So it's just getting that conversation going, get them talking, keep them talking, listen like a life depends on it. I did that every job that I went to. I very rarely negotiated with somebody where I talked them into doing something. It was all about listening. And listening is the hostage negotiator's superpower. It's what makes them different. The number of times where I would be negotiating with somebody, and inexplicably, after 40 minutes, 50 minutes, they'd say to me, can I put the knife down now? Can I come down now? Can we end this now? And you'd say to them, as we're walking back to a police car and ambulance, well, what did I say? What did I do? Why have you come down? And the number of times people have said to me, because nobody's ever listened to me like that before, you make somebody feel like they're being listened to. You make them feel like they're the only person in the room, and they will tell you stuff.
It sounds simple, but in reality, it's not. We've got that urge often in conversations, including in negotiations, to fill up their space, to talk.
Yeah,
And now I heard you say that asking too many questions can make the other person feel like, okay, I'm being interrogated. now you're saying that one of the key skills is to make the other person keep them talk, make them talk, keep them talking. But at the same time, if I remember well, I heard you say you don't want to ask too many questions. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we talk for maximum 20% of the time without asking so many questions? How do we
Yeah,
give the other person space without asking questions after question after question?
yeah. So we have to exploit the rules of polite conversation. So polite conversation, as we're taught from being very young, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. Don't interrupt, it's rude. And a conversation's got to have a natural conclusion. If somebody says something to you, you've got to reply. You can't just walk off. So all we do is exploit that. So my turn in the conversation has got one purpose when I'm negotiating, and that's to make it your turn again. So I'm going to use fillers. We used to call it fog language. It's language that says nothing, but it takes my turn of the conversation and makes it yours. So if, for example, I was talking to a guy and he starts talking about his daughter, the natural reaction is to start asking loads of questions. What does she do? Does she go to school? Has she got any hobbies? Well, this is all, it's stuff that I want to talk about. It's my agenda. We're not talking about the things that are on your agenda. So I'll say, tell me about your daughter. It's a question, but it's a good question because a tell me question doesn't even look like a question, doesn't sound like a question. It's a invitation to speak. So you start telling me things about your daughter. And when you get to the end, I'll say, oh, wow, she sounds like the apple of daddy's eye. I've taken my turn of the conversation. It's your go again. So you'll tell me more about daughter. And when you get to the end of what you're saying, I'll go, sounds like she's got her wrapped around your little finger. I've taken my turn. I've bounced it back to you again. I've added nothing. So you tell me more about daughter. So I've now got three strikes for the price of one. So it's all about minimizing my go. You'll say something that interests me. Naturally, what we would do is ask a question. We will try and avoid doing that. We will echo what people say. We'll summarize what somebody said. We'll paraphrase it to take our turn and make it theirs again. I mean, a
Can you give
classic.
me, oh yeah,
Yeah,
an example? Yeah.
a classic example is that if I said to you I'm going on my holidays, what's the natural reaction?
Or where are you going?
Where are you going? I'm so glad you got that right. Where are you going? Yeah, oh, well, I'm going to Corsica. Oh, never been to Corsica. I've been to Cape Verde. Cape Verde is lovely at this time of year. We went there last year for a couple of weeks. Weather was beautiful. You're now into this sort of thing about Cape Verde. Well, I'm going to Corsica because I just need to get away and have a break. But we're not having that conversation now. I'd like to think if you said to a hostage negotiator, I'm going on my holidays, they'd quizzically put their head on one side and go, holidays? They've taken their turn in the conversation. It's now your go, and you're going to tell us why you want to go on your holidays. Yeah, do you know what? Things are a bit rough at the minute. I get the impression you're struggling at work. No, work's good, but my mother-in-law's not well. We've got some respite care. We're going away for a couple of weeks. We're now having a completely different conversation because I'm not asking questions. I'm echoing things that are interesting to me and I'm using fillers. And that works just as well in a business scenario. When you're sat in a meeting with a member of a team or somebody that you're negotiating with, and they turn around to you and say, "Ah, we're supposed to be a team." Now, the natural thing to do is to jump in and go, well, because supposed is the word that I want to know about. To jump in and go, well, what do you mean by supposed? Which sounds defensive, or even worse, well, we are a team. We do. So when somebody says that now, we're supposed to be a team, don't kind of, it's like rolling a grenade in, isn't it? Don't dive on it. Don't try and disarm it. Just kick it straight back to them by echoing it. We're supposed to be a team. Supposed. You've taken your turn of a conversation. It's now your go, and you've got to come good with zero thinking time about what supposed actually means. So I'm more likely to get an honest and unguarded response. So that's what we'll do. Somebody says something interests us, we'll just echo it, and they will unpack it for us. If somebody says to me, things have got a lot worse recently, there's so much in there that I want to know about. Things, what's that all about? have got worse. That talks about the journey recently. What was the trigger? Why today? Rather than tie myself in knots thinking about it, I will just echo the whole thing back. Things have got a lot worse recently. Things have got a whole lot worse recently. And they will start to unpack it for me and tell me what they want to about it. We go through their topics, and when we've gone through their topics, if there's still things that I want to know about, then I might start exploring those by using questions. But I'll be very careful in what questions I use. It'll be tell me, explain to me, describe to me.
Very open
Yeah. So
questions.
they're much better than the what, when, who, how, where. Because if I said to somebody, how did you get here today? Nice open question. How did you get here? Came by car. No information. If I said to them, describe to me in detail how you got here today, they're not going to say car, because that's not going to answer the question. You automatically get more information. So we do ask questions, but we really try not to, because it does turn a conversation into an interview, into an interrogation. Um, and we're also rubbish at asking questions, especially when we're under pressure. So then we'll start reverting back to closed questions. Did you do this? Did he say that? And you're punching yourself senseless, but I'm getting no information whatsoever. I'm no wiser. So it's all about, like I say, exploit. Going back to what we were saying before, exploiting those rules of polite conversation, so that it's like playing a game of table tennis. Every time you bat the ball over my side of a table, all I'm going to do is tap it back over again, so it's your go, so that the focus is on you, and you're telling me more things that I'm able to use to be able to influence you. It's all about influence. It's not about negotiation. It's all about influence. If I want to get somebody to do something in a business setting, or any other kind of negotiation, got to do three things: get them to like you, get them to trust you. Now you've earned the right to be able to influence them. It is as simple as that.
And can you influence, because you said, okay, it's about influencing, it's not about negotiating. Can you influence someone, and it could be in a one-to-one negotiation or just maybe two groups. We want to influence someone, but sometimes we can be in a weak position. The dynamic makes it so that we are in a weak position, but I know I'm in a weak position, but I want to be able to influence
Yeah,
the other person. Is it possible to do that if we are in a weak position? And if so, is there something here that we need to consider, especially when we are in a weak position, starting
yeah,
the negotiation or the conversation?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly 130 incidents that I deployed to, I never negotiated from a position of strength. You were always going to an incident, and on paper, and when it was being explained to you, it looked like a complete lost cause. It was like going to a high stakes poker game and looking down at your hand, and you've got two Uno cards and a beer mat. The worst possible hand. And yet I still had to come up with something special. I still had to save a life. I still had to sort this mess out. And that's when you deploy there. You use that combination of warmth and competence. So you start right from the very beginning, thinking about that first impression, what people think about you. Start developing that connection with them. You start developing that connection with them and start using a bit of conversation management, you're starting to get them to talk. As soon as you start to get them to talk, you're actually, one, increasing the sort of influence that you've got, but you're getting valuable information. You're getting valuable information about what is important to them. What's their currency? What makes them tick? Because it might not, you might be sat there thinking, trying to second guess them. This is all about money. They're just going to try and rinse as much money out of me as they can in this deal. Actually, it might not be about that at all. It could be about reliability. It could be wanting that kind of real team ethic, somebody that they can trust. That might be the words that are important to them. Those might be the values and beliefs that you need to tap into to be able to influence them. Um, in a negotiation, for me, it's all about finding out what your currency is. It's
Hmm.
about finding out what is important to you, finding out what your values and beliefs are. Because once I've found out what your values are, I can use that. Because I can use my values and beliefs all day to try and get you to do things differently, and it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. But if I can show you that what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're suggesting is not in line with your own values and beliefs, you're now having a very difficult internal conversation with yourself, because you can argue against mine all day. You can't argue against your own. So get them talking, keep them talking, find out what's important to them, find out what their values are, get all this other information. And then actually you're in a much stronger position than you were. And very often now you've got to a position where you think, do you know what? Not only have I got all this information, but I've now developed a relationship with them where I've earned the right to be able to problem solve, make suggestions, reframe things, look at alternative solutions, because we've actually earned the right to do that. And we've done all that kind of relationship building and trust building in order to do that.
You mentioned a few keywords: relationship, trust, connection. Out of curiosity, Nigel, in your experience as a hostage negotiator, have you ever connected with someone, on the other hand, so deeply that it surprised you? You said that at the end it made you say, okay, wow, that was an interesting exchange, or surprised you maybe that again, years later you still thought about it. Have you ever made a really strong connection with someone?
I've met some amazing people in some of the incidents that I went to, where over a short period of time, yeah, you've not just got to connect with them, you've got to actually like them as a person. You've seen the circumstances that you're in. You've really wanted to help them. You've got really, really invested in that situation. They may then make the decision to put the knife down, stop doing what it is that they're doing, stop hurting themselves or anybody else. And at that point, they get whisked away, and I never get to see them again. Ever. In 130 incidents, I only ever met one of them again after I'd negotiated with them. And that is really weird, because every single one of them, it's like it's unfinished. There's unfinished business. It's almost like somebody described it to me once as you're leaving a part of yourself there at every single job, because you never actually get that full resolution in your mind. I've negotiated with teenage kids, and I would love to know how things have panned out for them, but I've not got a clue. And that is strange. But yeah, it's actually when you start to, it's very easy to be judgmental, and we're all judgmental. But if you go in that, you've got that frame in your mind where you're just thinking, you know, I'm just going to show this person kind of unconditional positive regard, irrespective of what they've done. This is still somebody's son. This is somebody's brother. This is somebody's dad, and I'm going to do the absolute damnedest I can to make sure that this all works out for them. Then it's quite easy to connect with people who actually you've not got a great deal in common with. As a matter of fact, some of them are horrors. Um, but when you start looking for those things that connect you, and that's the key thing in a negotiation, right from the very start, I'm thinking, where is that connectivity? What have we got in common? Especially if I'm dealing with a horror, because once you've found something that connects you, something that you've got in common, your way, that breaks down barriers. It really does. And I would say, you know, to anybody, if you've got to deal with somebody you really can't stand the sight of, you're really struggling with, that is going to get in the way. Look for something that you've got in common, because once you've done that, actually you're away. We like people, and we are prepared to be influenced by people who are like us, and that's why it's important.
Before we continue with this episode, I just want to share a few resources that I think will be super useful for you. The first one is check out either my book, Confident Presenter, or my colleague Phil Wakenall's book, Business Presentation Revolution, or both. These are books for business owners and leaders who want to take their presentation skills to a higher level. To make the most of the books, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your presentation skills for free in less than 3 minutes. And then also, at the moment, I'm running a series of free presentation skills web classes, and I'd love to see you there. The links are in the show notes. Now, let's go back to the episode. You said earlier that sometimes, for example, you don't want to make assumptions. We may think, oh, that person is doing that for money, but then you realize that it's not about the money, and it could be a million other similar assumptions like this. Have you have you ever misread someone completely, where either because of an assumption or could be bias? Do you have situations where you misread, you misunderstood someone?
I've gone into situations where I have been seeing whatever it is that they're doing, whatever situation they're in, through the lens of my own eye
Mm,
and through my experience, through my life experience, and automatically assume that what is important to me is what's important to them. You know, I can get this person to start doing things differently because he is a family man. He's got a daughter, and I can use that to get him to do things differently because that has got to be, that's the key to the door. And further down the line, when I've been absolutely knocking myself senseless trying to use this stuff, it has actually come to light that actually, yeah, he has got a daughter. He loves his wife and his daughter dearly. However, in terms of his currency, in terms of his values and beliefs and the levers that I need to use to get him to do things differently, it's not about that. It's about self respect. It's about his ego. It's about his reputation within the business scene. So I've completely misread the situation by thinking that's important to me. I would stop doing that now for my wife and my kids. He must think exactly the same, and that's not how it works. And very often we don't have to get in people's heads. You know, we don't have Jedi mind tricks that we used to get in people's heads. It's about it's about good old fashioned listening and conversation management.
mm.
And if you do that, and you sit there thinking, I mean, it's very twee. I mean, it's all over LinkedIn at the minute about listening to understand. There is a great deal of truth in it. We listen a lot of the time from our own perspective, and we make sense of it from our own perspective. The problem with that is that we problem solve from that perspective. So what worked for me must work for them. What worked in this situation must work in that situation for them. And very often that's not the case. I mean, the one thing you should never hear coming out of the mouth of a hostage negotiator are the words "I understand." People say it because they think it sounds nice. They think that it's showing empathy, but actually, it's showing the complete opposite. You can't understand. If I said to you, and I've been made redundant, and you go, "Oh, that sounds tough. I understand," thinking that it sounds nice. Actually, you don't understand. You've not got a clue. All you understand is how you feel if that happened to you, and you're just reflecting that onto me. So, as negotiators, we should never use that term. You should never hear them saying, "I understand." What they should be saying is, "I can't even begin to understand what that must be like for you. Tell me about it." Let them articulate it, and then maybe you'll start to understand. This nonsense about walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, it's just it's rubbish. I can give you a pair of my shoes. You can walk as far as you want. You'll be no wiser as to how they feel like for me. You'll know what they feel like for you. But you'd come back and go, yeah, they do roll on the heel, don't they? What you need to do, alarm bell should start ringing, is just put some plasters on your heel and you'll be fine. You problem solve from your perspective instead of actually truly working out what's important to them, what the situation is like for them, how they feel, what their values are, and listening to understand, letting them articulate it. And then, do you know what? At that point, maybe we'll start to understand.
Yeah, listening to understand. Often another thing that we do is that we listen while thinking about what we want to say next, which is again our own perspective. Now, I understand you say a hostage negotiator should never say I understand. You also, and thank you for that, you gave us an example like redundancy, which is not about hostage negotiation, it's
Mm,
like day-to-day
mm.
business situations. Is there, and the answer might be no, but just out of curiosity, are there any other words or phrases that a hostage negotiator, or in general, even a business person having conversations with a purpose should never say, or maybe the opposite, words or phrases, or it could be habits, doesn't have to be a word, that you should say more often or you should do more often because you know that it works in a negotiation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, shall we start with the what you should never say first?
Yes, let's go. Yeah.
Okay, let's go there. You should never be telling anybody that they need to calm down. Never in the history of calming down has anybody ever calmed down because they've been told to. It gets even worse when you hear yourself saying, I think you need to calm down. That's about as bad as it gets. So, yeah, we don't tell people to
Before
calm
you
down.
continue, Nigel, before you continue, you just made me feel bad because I think I say that to my wife all the time.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, I will now give you a phrase that you can use instead. Okay, so a phrase that we use very often, um, as negotiators is a phrase that goes something on the lines of "I get the impression that." It's a really nice turn of phrase. It's non-judgmental, and I'm a firm believer you can stick anything on the end of that. It's really difficult to take offence. So next time your wife is climbing the walls and shouting at you, then you turn around and say, I get the impression this has made you really angry. And she will either tell you that you're right, and it's now her turn in the conversation. So she's telling you stuff, or she'll correct you. So she might turn around and go, no, I'm not angry. I'm just really frustrated about this. They'll either correct you or tell you that what you're saying is correct. So it's a really nice turn phrase to use. If you've got a difficult conversation to have with somebody, and we very often have in business, very often it's starting that conversation, which is the hard thing. You've actually, once you've started, you're away. So it's like, how do I deal with the elephant in the room? How, so when somebody comes in and says, you need to speak to Steve, nobody wants to work with him because he smells. It's like, oh, grief, where on earth do I go with this? You know, you can bring Steve in and you can throw the team under the bus by saying, yeah, the team have been in, nobody wants to work with you because you smell. Or you could turn around and using this set of skills and say, do you know what, Steve, we've worked together for a long time. And I get the impression that you're struggling with your personal hygiene. Steve, I get the impression that you're drinking more than you used to. Steve, I get the impression you've been spending money on prostitutes. You can stick anything on the end of it. It's very difficult to take offense. And they will either say, yeah, that's right, or they will correct you. They will not bite your head off. So if you've got one of those conversations to have, if you've got to approach that elephant in the room, very often using that phrase, I get the impression that is a really nice non-judgmental way of doing it. It's a really good way. If you're a business leader, or a line manager in a leadership role within an organization, and you've got to have one-to-ones with members of your team, it's a really nice way of dealing with some of those thorny issues with a one-to-one. I get the impression that it's a really nice non-judgmental way of approaching it, but direct.
Any other phrases, words that either we should not use or we should use because they work?
Not so much stuff that you should use. You know, very often we run away from the tough conversations. When somebody says something, you know, I can be chatting to somebody and I'll mention dad. And they turn around and say, you know, I don't want to talk about dad. I'm not talking about dad. Don't you talk about him to me again. You know, what's the one thing I've got to talk about?
Dad.
We've got to talk about dad. Um, So I've now got to spend some time developing a relationship, building that trust. So actually, I can kind of work my way back round again and start talking about dad from a different angle. Sometimes people say to us, I'm not going to talk about that. And we take it as read that that's, you know, that's sacrosanct. We're not going to talk about dad. We are. But I'm going to be very smart about how I develop that relationship and bring you round to that topic of conversation again. You can have some really tough negotiations, really tough conversations when you're negotiating, you're having that kind of conversation. Um, but if we're being strategic in what we're thinking, I know where I am now, I know where I want to get to. How am I going to get there? And I'm thinking about what do I sound like? Because I'm again a firm believer that you can get away with saying so much if you're actually nice about it. You've got that balance of warmth and competence. So you know what you're doing and you're a good guy. You know what you're doing and you're a good woman. Then actually some of these conversations are not as tough as they seem. When we run from them, we're scared of having them. But actually sometimes you need to be brave, be intentional, play nice, and you can talk about just about anything.
So far, Nigel, you've mentioned a lot of practical skills that we need to develop to become better negotiators, or as you say, we shouldn't even negotiate. We should approach those conversations as conversations with a purpose. I was just thinking, is there a known negotiation skill? Like something that you wouldn't normally categorize as a negotiation skill? Because for example, if you tell me listening, okay, listening for me is, I can see why it's very much connected to being a good negotiator. And by the way, the answer might be no, there isn't. I can't think of anything. But is there a skill or a technique, something that normally you wouldn't classify it as a negotiation skill, but it's actually something super important that made you a much better negotiator?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it came to me, I think it came to me late on in the day. And it's about being authentic and it's about being yourself. Um, and I think most people who fail hostage negotiators courses fail it because they try to be a hostage negotiator instead of actually being themselves, taking themselves to work, being the version of themselves that they need to be. So we've all got that kind of scale. I can wake up one morning, I can be a delight. The next morning, I can be a diva. We kind of, but whereabouts within that scale do I need to be? So I'm being true to myself and being authentically myself in order to be able to influence that person. Because if I walk in there and I play the hostage negotiator, I'm going to get absolutely nowhere. Nobody is going to talk to me. Nobody will. When somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be, the last person they want to speak to is a hostage negotiator. So that's why, in terms of kind of personal branding, the first, that first impression that I created, it was always about me. You know, my name's Nigel. I'm here with the police. What's happened today to bring you here? Tell me about it, or whatever it is. But I was already from the very get go being authentically myself. If I was given a bulletproof shield to take into an incident, the first thing I would do would be get black electrician's tape out of my pocket and tape over the top of police. It's not the brand that I'm looking for. I wanted to be me, and that, like I said, came to me really late in the day. And it worked for me, 19 times out of 20. You went in there and it was so much easier to connect with people. And that one time in 20, I would probably get burnt for being a little bit over familiar or something like that. And you just go, "Oh, I'm really sorry. We've got off on the wrong foot. It's my fault entirely. Can we start again?" And nobody ever says to you, "No, let's carry on. I'm enjoying this." You're always going to get the opportunity to kind of rewind and try again. So yeah, take yourself to work. Just be yourself. It just breaks down barriers. But it's got to be within what is authentically you. Don't try making out that you're Tigger when you're actually Eeyore. Just be the best version of yourself. Be the version of yourself that you need to be to influence somebody.
Yeah. The opening lines, I'm also thinking about the first story that you shared at the beginning of this conversation. Now you said, my name is Nigel. I'm here with the police. Is there the typical opening line, or was that just an example?
That was just it was an example. It was probably, I mean, we very often had go-to opening lines because you knew their words. My opening line has got two purposes. It's got to introduce me and it's got to get you talking. Um, and it's got to start developing that connection between the two of us. So when you settle on one you were comfortable with, very often you would use it. But it's certainly not the only opening line that we had. But it's so important. That opening line when you deliver it, it's got to sound like you. It's got to be delivered in a way that you want it to sound. And there's only one way that can actually happen, and that is if you practice it. So as negotiators, we practice our opening line on the way to the incident in a very specific way, out loud and in the first person. So that when I open my mouth and I start talking, I don't just know what I'm going to say, I know what I'm going to sound like. It's going to sound like me. It's not going to come out 2 octaves higher because I'm a little bit nervous. And I'm going to start squeaking instead of speaking. Um, I'm not gonna be croaking, and first impressions count. If it comes out and it just sounds a little bit weak, then you're starting off on the back foot, and people are thinking, and there's certain that voice in your head starts going, he doesn't like me. He thinks I sound a little bit weak, or whatever it is. So we need to nail it. One, for confidence purposes for ourselves, but two, to start developing that relationship. So if you've got a business meeting, a presentation to do to somebody, know what your opening line is. But don't just write it down on a piece of paper and commit it to memory. That doesn't work. Hear yourself say it out loud and in the first person. I'll be going up a lift to the top of the multi-story car park. Hi, my name's Nigel. I'm here with the police. I can't even begin to imagine what's happened to bring you up here today. Tell me about it, or whatever that opening line is going to be. It comes out. It sounds good. Bingo, you're away. You know it sounded good. Your confidence is up, and negotiation is a confidence game.
Yeah, say it out loud. As you said, it's so true in many other scenarios, not just in negotiations, also as you said in a presentation. And you talked about the importance of practicing. Now, this is one version or one application of the importance of practicing. But if I think about practicing, there are many other things that I can imagine a negotiator needs to do before, even before you get there. And if you think about that, Nigel, your preparation before you go there, I
Hmm.
don't know. So preparation, your planning, maybe your strategy.
Yeah.
Did you even now? Do you tend to have for your current negotiations in your work? Do you have a checklist that you go through? And I'm asking this question also because I heard you say on LinkedIn, I think, or maybe in another podcast, that you did talk about the importance of preparation, but at the same time, you said sometimes you don't want to know too much
Yeah.
about that person or that situation. And when I heard it, the first thing I thought was, okay, it's a bit counterintuitive
Yeah.
because I think the more you know about that context, that situation, that
Yeah.
person, the better. But you said, okay, it depends. Tell me
It's
more.
it's a double-edged sword. So first of all, in terms of strategy, before I deploy to any situation, before anybody's listening to this podcast, goes into a meeting, a difficult one-to-one, a sales call, whatever it is, work out what your strategy is. Know what the outcome is that you want to achieve out of that meeting. Because when you get in that meeting and it goes badly very quickly, that is your true north. So when I go to an incident, something happens, and you just think, oh, wow, grief. What am I here to do? What am I here to achieve? What is the final outcome that I'm looking for? That gives you that clarity, and that really helps you. So that kind of preparation, in terms of knowing where I am now, where I want to get to, how I'm going to get there, is really important. What you were referring to is when we start doing that research about the individual. So I'm going to a job. I'm negotiating with a man with a gun hanging out the bedroom window. It's no different than you're going into a meeting with a long-term client that you're renegotiating a contract with.
Maybe a little bit different. Maybe.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So sometimes you can know too much about them. You need to know, you need to do your due diligence. You need to know stuff. What's been going on, what's the situation, what are people's drivers? Why is this happening? What's happening and why is it happening? But if I came to a job here today, there's a guy up on the roof. I walk up to the front of the address and the commander's there and I say, "What have you got?" And she says, "Nigel, we've got a guy up on the roof. What's his name?" "John." "Right, okay." I'm now negotiating with John, who is on the roof of the house. If I turn up at that address, and the commander comes racing over to me and says, "Nigel, thank goodness you're here. CID went round to this guy's house this morning to lock him up for multiple sexual offences. He's climbed out the bedroom window and he's now up on the roof." With the best will in the world, I'm now negotiating with John the rapist. And that, no matter how hard I try, is gonna come out in the way that I negotiate, the way that I connect and communicate with him. And it's no different in business. The number of times that I was told before I went into meetings, um, just be careful with her now. She's a little bit spiky.
True.
Or at some point he is going to say this is a massive block because I'm now sat there waiting for him to say what he's going to say. And all I'm doing in the meantime is running that tape in my head about what I'm going to say when he says it. So I'm not even listening. So it can become a massive, massive block. I did this with a company up in Scotland a couple of months ago, and there was a woman. She was sat there, and she went, she said, "I've got a negotiation tomorrow with somebody." She says, "We really don't get on." And obviously football's a big thing up there. She said, "I'm going to come wearing green." She said, "I'm going to come wearing his colours tomorrow, um, because we want to connect with people." So yeah, especially if you're briefing somebody else to go into a meeting on your behalf, just be careful what information that you give them. Never talk about people. Just be careful with it. Him, Nige, he's going to say this. That's just a massive block. I work with a lot of CEO peer support groups, and sometimes I'll be getting a briefing off the chair about the people in the room, and as soon as one of them says, um, "I've got one, he's a bit of a problem child," I'm like, "Whoa, don't tell me anything else. I don't want to know anything else." They've probably told me too much already because as soon as the individual walks through the door, I know who it is. And then for the rest of that session, every time he asks me a question, it's because he's the problem child. Every time he frowns, he's the problem child. Every time he writes something down, it's like, what's he writing? He's the problem child. And you end up driving yourself mad and not concentrating on the stuff that really, really matters. So, yeah, don't do your due diligence, but just don't make it personal.
Now I get it. I can totally see why in those particular from that perspective you don't want to know too much. Yeah. And earlier you mentioned nerves. You said, okay, you go there and you feel a bit nervous.
Mhm.
So that tells me that you do feel, especially in those hostage negotiation situations, you did feel nervous.
Mhm.
Did you have anything that habits or things that you did not to overcome the nerves entirely, because we all know that that's not possible, but we do want to try and deal with them
Yeah.
in a more constructive, in a more positive way. What was your approach?
Yeah. So that you can't fight your own biology. It's absolutely impossible. Your body is going to do what your body was designed to do thousands of years ago. Um, so no matter how often I went to a negotiation, no matter how confident I might have felt in myself, you still got that physiological response. Your heart is still going like the clappers. You're still getting those butterflies. Your hands are still shaking that little bit. It's your body doing what it was designed to do. So the first thing to do is recognize that. You are not going mad. Your body was designed to do this. It's just making sure that it doesn't overcome you. So I used to, in my own mind, I used to look round and just laugh about it and say, "Well, I can't see any saber-toothed tigers around here." Because that's what it was. That's what that fight or flight mechanism was for. You were walking across Serengeti, something came the other way, and you had to decide if you were breakfast or it was breakfast. It was all about that fight or flight, and we've never jettisoned it. So I just look around the room and think, well, I can't see any saber-toothed tigers in here. Um, and the other thing is actually the anticipation is always worse than the main event. Somebody's doing a presentation, somebody's getting up on their feet and doing a presentation. They're sitting there waiting for their turn. It's like being in the waiting room at the dentist. It's horrible. But actually, once you're up on your feet and once you're 30 seconds in, you're away. Which is why we used to say, you know your direction of travel, know what you want to do, but we practice and we prepare meticulously for that first 30 seconds. Because once that first 30 seconds is done, you're away. You've landed that good first impression. You're now concentrating on what really matters and not what your pulse is. It's still going like the clappers. I spoke at a conference in Birmingham a couple of months ago, and I was on stage 45 minutes, came off, and if you'd said to me, how did that go? I'd go, brilliant, amazing. As a matter of fact, it didn't just go amazing, I enjoyed myself. Later on that evening, I looked at my Fitbit, and my heart rate had gone 60, 60, 60, 60, 120 for the duration of being on stage and back down. If you'd asked me at the time, I was cool as a cucumber. You can't fight your own biology. You are not going mad. Just laugh at yourself and get on with it.
And I would add, when it comes to preparing for the first 30 seconds, I agree 100%. And I would say prepare for the first 30 seconds even more, but I would say like prepare in general. Make
Yeah,
sure that
yeah,
you are
yes, yes,
prepared,
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
especially the
yeah,
first 30 seconds.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I was also thinking in terms of negotiation with hostages, but again, I'm always curious and trying to get things that can work also
Mm.
in a business context. Do you think that it's possible for people to understand if someone is being real or not, or if someone is not telling the truth?
Yeah, I mean, there will be tells. I was never massively into body language and stuff like that. I was too busy dealing with people. But sometimes there's the obvious things where is what somebody's saying, is it congruent with how they look and what their body is saying? It's like when a little boy kicks a football through a window and you say, "Was that you?" And they go, "No." You get those. You will get those completely obvious things, and you'll be able to see them. For me, it was about if you can get people talking and get them to articulate it, they will actually start to trip themselves up. If you take your turn in the conversation quickly and bounce it back to them so that they've got no thinking time, you're more likely to get an honest, unguarded response, and that's when the cracks start appear. If you're going to ask a question and you make it a good one, then again, there's more likelihood of them letting something slip. But generally speaking, the longer you can keep somebody talking, the more likely are to show you that actually what they're saying isn't true.
By the way, Nigel, you made me think about some my own experience, and I've never shared this in a public domain in a business context. I'm going to do it now. It's okay. It's fine. It happened many years ago. I was a student at university, and I was supposed to go to Chicago, to the US from Italy. At the time, I was still in Italy for for an internship, a 3 month internship. And unfortunately, that was the rule of the rules of the game were, and by the way, these were not my own rules of the game. Both the university in Italy and the company in the US were in alignment on this. They both told me, look, you get to the US and you need to tell them that you are a tourist. Don't tell them that you're going to work and that you're coming for work. So I went there. I told them I'm a tourist for 3 months. It was just a random check. So they sent me to a room. And I spent, Nigel, from 4 p.m. to midnight being interrogated. And it was the most horrible experience of my life. And I'm saying this because what they did was exactly what you said now. Question after question, trying to make it as hard as possible for me without giving me and even no even a second to think about my answer. But they wanted to understand, okay, are you being congruent? Are you
Yeah,
what you're telling me now, is there in alignment with what you told me 5 minutes ago?
yeah,
And in the end, they found out that I
yeah,
was not a
yeah.
tourist. And but anyway, yeah, that's what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, that's probably in terms of structuring a really good interview that's going to maximize your information. That's probably not best ever. But to keep hammering people with questions. Okay, sometimes like you over a period of time, you might go on, oh, okay, all right, I'm not a
It was 4
tourist.
p.m. to midnight. Yeah,
Yeah, but very often people will just bring the drawbridge down. And you'll get very, very little information as a result of that. They will be defensive. What we want to do is actually try and subvert that defense, try and get round it by showing that warmth and that competence, showing that you're interested in what it is that they've got to say so that they tell you more stuff. And yeah, towards the end of the interview, you might start asking more direct questions. So you said this before, but then you said that which didn't make sense. Can you just explain that to me? And you can still do that. You can still be quite sharp. Being a negotiator, it's not about being pink and fluffy. It's not about being kind of very very nicey. Um, I'll get more information very often if I do that. But very often when I'm using those, I hate the phrase, those soft skills, I'm actually doing them in a context of a really difficult conversation. And I would argue there's nothing soft about it. If I'm using really clever conversation management skills to get you talking, keep you talking, and I'm listening like a life depends on it. So I'm getting information that I'm then going to use to influence you to get you to do things differently. There's nothing pink and fluffy about it. There's nothing soft about it at all. I might be doing all that as a negotiator to get you to come to the window so that the SAS can put a round in you.
got it, got it. Nigel, are you into books? Do you read books or listen to books?
Not as much as I should, but I do read the odd book, yes.
Okay. So, and again, if nothing comes to mind, that's fine. But because I love books, I read
Mm,
all the time. If you think about what we've discussed
yeah.
today, are there any books that you are familiar with that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's a couple. One of them, the main one is by the main one on the market is Chris Voss, Never Split a Difference.
I know that
Really,
one. Yeah, yeah.
really good book. Really good book. Um, so Chris talks a lot about a lot of stuff that I do. We're both kind of teaching from the same framework, I suppose. Another really good one is Robert Cialdini, and
Oh,
it's called
Influence. Oh, yeah,
Influence.
that's a masterpiece. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good book. That is kind of he's the godfather of influence when it comes to hostage negotiators. And that is a really book. I mean, it's quite a thin book, but it's got within it what he calls his seven weapons of social influence, seven shortcuts to get people to say yes and change their behavior. And because he's a professor of psychology over in the States, it's all research based and it's very, very clever.
True. And I've read both books. I agree. I agree with you. Great books. I'm going to include them in the show notes. And for you, Nigel, if someone wants to connect with you, say hi, find out more about what you do, what your work is about, where should they go?
Yeah, so I virtually live on LinkedIn. So if you search for me on LinkedIn, you will find me there or my website, www.nigeltaberner.com. But the best place to get me is probably on LinkedIn.
Okay, website to find out a little bit more about your work, and then LinkedIn to get in touch. Again, I'm
Yeah.
going to include both links in the show notes. Thank you for sharing your experience, your insights, for taking the time. I really appreciate it, Nigel. All the very
Oh, you're
best. Take
welcome.
care.
Thank you.